Somewhere inside the operations office of one of the biggest tennis tournaments in the world, staff are quietly preparing for a level of noise they did not create and cannot fully control. And the reason is a 21-year-old with no Grand Slam title to her name, which raises the only question that matters before a single ball is struck in Mason, Ohio. Why does an organization that already hosts Aryna Sabalenka, Mira Andreeva, Amanda Anisimova, Naomi Osaka, and defending champion IGA, Swiatek feel the need to single out one more name and brace for it specifically? The Cincinnati Open does not need a new star, it already has legends, which is exactly what makes it strange that in its own official player announcement, the tournament stopped to highlight her by name alongside Brazilian sensation João Fonseca for having some of the most fervent and boisterous supporters in the sport. That is not a marketing line invented by a fan account. That is an institution admitting, in writing, that it has noticed something it cannot fully manage, something that exists outside the normal machinery of seeding and ranking points, something closer to a movement than a fan base. Call her Alex, the way an entire nation has started saying it, like she belongs to them personally, and in a matter of days she walks into a completely reimagined version of this tournament, a 40-acre site rebuilt through a reported $260 million renovation with new courts, new fan zones, and new entertainment spaces, transforming the event into something closer to a sporting festival than a single competition. In 2025, this tournament pulled in a record 285,571 fans from every state in the country and 65 nations around the world. In 2026, organizers are bracing for nearly 300,000. Qualifying begins August 11th. The singles final arrives August 23rd. And somewhere inside that massive rebuilt ecosystem, a Filipino walks in carrying the accumulated hope of a country that has waited generations for a moment exactly like this one, a country whose sporting identity has long been built on boxing rings and basketball courts, but almost never on center court at a tennis major. Here is where the tension actually lives, and it is worth sitting with for a second because none of this guarantees anything. Flags do not return serves. Chants do not save a match point. A 40-acre renovation does not hit a single forehand for her. If she loses in the first round, all of this noise evaporates into nothing, just another promising story that stalled the moment it mattered most, one more athlete who became a headline before she became a champion. So why does anyone believe otherwise? Because weeks earlier, in Washington, this exact question was already put to the test, and the answer arrived with unusual force. Before that tournament even began, the chairman revealed that nearly 80% of ticket inquiries that month were not about the event itself, they were about one specific question: when is Alex playing? That is not the level of attention given to a player still building her name. That is the level of attention given to someone who has already become an event unto herself, a person people were organizing their entire schedules around before she had struck a single ball. And then, almost immediately, she nearly proved the doubters right. In her opening match against former world number 4 and Olympic gold medalist Jung Chin-wen, she lost the first set, then fell behind in the second. And for a moment, it looked exactly like the story everyone secretly feared: hype outrunning results, the pressure of the moment arriving before the game was ready to meet it. Then, quietly, almost invisibly, something shifted. She clawed her way back, forced a decider, and dismantled Jung in the third set, 6-1. Not a scare, a statement. And the crowd got louder after that win. Not before it, which matters more than almost anything else in this story, because belief that is earned survives losses, while belief that is only borrowed from hype does not survive the first bad set. She kept earning hers, match after match, until she reached a final that had no business feeling inevitable against Jessica Pegula, a former world number 3 and Grand Slam finalist, someone who had spent years in rooms Alex was only just being invited into, a player whose experience alone should have been enough to close the door. She dropped the first set. Then the skies opened and rain delayed the match. And if you know anything about tennis, you know that rain delays are dangerous in a specific, cruel way. They do not just pause a match. They pause a mind mid-fight and force it to sit alone with every doubt it was trying to outrun. Players have lost matches during rain delays without hitting a single extra shot. simply because their nerves unraveled in the silence, because the mind is a far more dangerous opponent than whoever is standing on the other side of the net. So what did she do when the covers came off? She did not hesitate. She took the second set, then closed the third with a merciless 6-love, not scraping through, but closing against a former top 3 player in a final after a rain delay had given her every reason to unravel. When the last ball landed, something happened that had never happened before in the history of the sport. She became the first Filipina to ever win a WTA Tour level singles title, an entire country's tennis history rewritten in one final set, in one afternoon, on one court most of the country had never heard of a week earlier. But greatness does not reward you with rest. It rewards you with higher stakes, because now every tournament she enters is no longer a chance to surprise people, it is a chance to disappoint them. Before a title, a deep run feels like magic. After a title, anything less than magic can feel like failure. And that is the exact trap waiting for her in Cincinnati on a far bigger stage than Washington ever was, against a far deeper field than Washington ever assembled. Because this story did not start there either. Rewind further to Wimbledon on grass, where the actual foundation of this phenomenon was built. She became the first player from the Philippines to ever reach the second week of a Grand Slam singles draw in the Open era. Not the first to win a round. The first ever in the modern history of the sport to survive long enough to see the second week, to still be playing when the tournament stopped being a formality and started being a war of attrition. Then came the moment that turned a good tournament into a legend in the making. On center court, one of the most intimidating stages in all of sport, she faced defending Wimbledon champion Iga Swiatek and beat her 7-6 in a first-set tiebreak that stretched to 9 points, then 6-2 to close it out. Not a near upset, a win on center court over a defending champion, delivered in front of a crowd that had no obligation to be on her side, and somehow was anyway. She later described looking into the stands during that tournament and seeing something she had not expected, a crowd that felt almost like a full house of Filipinos, despite Wimbledon tickets being among the hardest in the world to obtain. Think about the logistics hidden inside that image. People organizing, people flying across the world, people finding a way into one of the most exclusive venues on the planet just to be near her when it mattered. That is not casual fandom. That is identity, and identity-based support behaves completely differently than results-based support. Results-based fans disappear the moment you lose. Identity-based fans show up anyway, because they were never only cheering for a scoreline. They were cheering for what she represents, a country that has produced legendary boxers and basketball stars, but rarely, if ever, tennis players capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the very best in the world. A 5-week stretch on grass, a WTA 125 title in Birmingham, a semifinal in Berlin, and then the Wimbledon breakthrough pushed her all the way to a career high ranking of world number 28. 12 months earlier, the conversation around her was cautious, whispers about whether she could crack the top 100. Now the conversation has shifted entirely, not whether she belongs in the top 30, but how much higher she is capable of climbing, and how quickly the rest of the tour will have to adjust to a player they used to overlook. When the WTA Open voting for its mid-season fan award, Star of the Swing, the results were not close. She won with nearly 90% of the vote. That number does not happen from casual interest. It happens when an entire fan base mobilizes with the urgency usually reserved for something far bigger than a tennis poll, when a vote becomes less about ranking a season and more about a country declaring who belongs to them. So here is Cincinnati, arriving at exactly the moment this story cannot afford to slow down. A record-breaking crowd expected, a freshly rebuilt, sprawling venue, a draw stacked with legends who have already broken bigger names than hers. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you if you are paying close attention. Every one of her biggest wins so far has raised the ceiling of what people now expect from the next one. And raised expectations are their own opponent, one that does not live on the other side of the net, but entirely inside her own head, one that does not show up on a scoreboard until it is already too late to fix. Can she carry the weight of an entire country's hope into a draw filled with multiple Grand Slam champions? Can she manage the psychological shift from being the hunter to suddenly being the hunted, the player everyone studies instead of overlooks, the player whose matches now get circled on other players' schedules? Can she walk out in front of nearly 300,000 fans across this tournament, many of them there specifically because of her, and still play like nobody is watching? Nobody knows. That is not a dodge, that is the actual truth. And it is exactly why this is worth watching instead of assuming how it ends, because elite sport does not become gripping through guaranteed victory. It becomes gripping through uncertainty wrapped around someone who has already proven she is capable of something extraordinary. If she were ranked 200 and unknown, a first-round exit would mean nothing, a quiet footnote in a long season. But she is not unranked, and she is not unknown. She is a champion now, a Grand Slam second-week competitor, a player who beat a defending Wimbledon champion on the most famous court in the sport, which means every match from here forward carries weight it did not carry a year ago. That weight will either forge her into something her country has never produced before, or it will become the exact pressure that stalls everything she has built. Nobody watching gets to skip ahead and find out early. You have to sit with it point by point, the same way she does. And maybe that is the real reason the flags keep multiplying wherever she goes. Not because people expect a guaranteed outcome, but because they have learned over and over that when things look darkest, down a set, down a break, sitting through a rain delay with a final slipping away, she has a way of finding something extra exactly when it matters most. That is not a guarantee. It is a pattern, and patterns like that are exactly what turn a good athlete into a phenomenon, the kind of pattern that makes strangers rearrange their lives around a 2-week window in Ohio. People organize their travel, their vacation days, their entire weekends around the stretch because they have watched this pattern repeat enough times to trust it more than they trust a seeding list. So when the lights come up in Cincinnati, when her name is finally called and the first Philippine flag rises somewhere in that crowd of hundreds of thousands, followed by another and another, until the chants roll through the stands like something rehearsed for days, even though nobody planned it at all. Remember how this actually started. Remember Washington, where 80% of the questions were about one player before she had even played a match. Remember the third set against Zhang, when a struggling comeback turned into a statement about who she actually is under pressure. Remember the rain delay against Pegula, and the 6-love set that followed it, a set that answered every question the silence had tried to raise. Remember center court, and a defending champion who never saw it coming, who walked off that court having learned something about an opponent the rest of the tour was still underestimating. None of that happened because a crowd willed it into existence. It happened because point after point, match after match, she kept finding a way to be the player worth flying across the world to watch. Cincinnati does not need her to already believe that. Cincinnati is simply the next place she has to prove it all over again, against players who have already beaten legends themselves, on a stage that has already broken bigger names than hers, in front of a crowd whose size alone will test something no opponent ever could. Whether she wins the whole tournament or loses in the very first round is honestly not even the most interesting question anymore. The most interesting question is what she does in the moment right before the pressure becomes unbearable, that split second between the crowd going silent and the ball leaving her racket, because that is where every one of her biggest wins has actually happened, not in the celebration after, but in that split second before, the one no highlight reel ever really captures. And in a few days under lights, in front of the loudest, largest crowd this tournament has ever assembled, we finally get to watch her walk back into that exact split second one more time. Nobody, not the analysts, not the bookmakers, not even her own team, can tell you what happens next, which is exactly why an entire tennis world and an entire nation standing behind her simply cannot look away.